Today we're at the point in the Gemara at the bottom of Lamed Dal Amud Beis 32b, with a famous dispute over how tefillin are to be made between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam.
34b, right?
What did I say?
32.
Sorry, 34b. Yeah, my apologies. Lamed Dal Amud Beis. So the paper we have here in front of us is a paper we set up last year after Shavuos. We had a Kinnis Torah conference where members of the community shared words of Torah that they prepared. God willing, we'll have another one this year after Shavuos. And Adam Spiro, he presented on the understanding what the difference and what is the story with Rashi and Tam Tefillin. So together we worked together on putting together this packet of sources, which of course begins with our Gemara and our Rashi and our Tosfos. So we'll just use this because it's easier and it has translation so you can follow along. If you want to read more about it, we published afterwards a transcript of all the Torah presentations that were given that night, so you can read them. You can read Adam's write-up on this more in detail here. Okay, so begin here with this we've covered already, but there are 4 instances in the Torah when the commandment to don tefillin is mentioned. The following is the opening words of these sections of the Torah listed in chronological order in which they appear. This is important. There are 4 times the Torah mentions to put on tefillin, and here listed 1, 2, 3, 4 in order of how they appear in the Torah. And the opening words of those 4 sections in the Torah that the command to wear tefillin are the way they are labeled. Kadashli, V'hoye kiviyacha, Shema, and V'hoye Mishemaya. That's the way they are labeled. But just to make it easier, I put 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's how we're going to identify them as we go along. So it'll be easy to see the difference between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. So first let's look at our Gemara. So you'll see Talmud Tractate Menachot 34b. That's our Gemara. That's what we're learning now. That's right. That's right in the section of the page where we're holding. So I'm going to read it in the Hebrew and translate, but you can look at the English. The bold is the actual translation, and the regular font is interpolated commentary to make it easy to read. Okay. Tana Rabbanan, our sages taught. Mishnaic age text. Ketzad Sidron. What's the order of writing, or let's just say placing of the passages into the tefillin? Presumably, this is for both hand tefillin and head tefillin. Although when it comes to the head tefillin, it's much more distinctive because there are 4 different parchments written into 4 different compartments. Although the same thing applies to the hand tefillin. It's just a question of writing them down on one parchment versus writing them on 4 different parchments and putting them on 4 different compartments. So it's the same thing for hand tefillin and head tefillin, but it's easier to visualize when we're talking about the head tefillin, so we'll focus on that. But the same dispute applies to the hand tefillin as well. The same discussion. So Ketzad Sidron, what's the order? What's the way in which we organize these 4 different passages in the Torah that tell us to wear tefillin? Right. The reason why we're writing these 4 passages is because they say write these words upon your hand and head. So we're writing these words upon our hand and head. Okay. So first is Kadashli V'hoye kiviyacha miyamin. That's the order in which they appear in the Torah. Passage 1 and passage 2 on the right side. I'm translating literally because understanding this translation is going to be the dispute between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. V'hoye Shema, V'hoye Mishemaya, passages number 3 and 4, Mismail on the left side. End quote of the first text. Now the Gemara asks, Vatanya, but isn't it taught in the Braisa? In another Mishnaic age text. Ipcha, the exact opposite, namely, number 1 and 2, Kadesh V'hoye Kiviyacha on the left, Shema V'hoye Mishemaya, number 3 and 4 on the right. Exact opposite. Amar Abaye, so Abaye says, Loi Kasha, is no contradiction. Kan miyamini shel kaira, this, one of these 2 texts, is referring to the right and left of the reader. That is to say, if I'm wearing tefillin and you are standing opposite me, then you are the reader. Yeah? So your right side is my left side. And Khan, the other text, miyamine shel maniach, is talking about the right side of the one who puts them on. Now the Gemara concludes, V'akoira koira kesidron, and the reader reads them in the order. Meaning to say, whatever order you understand of the previous 2 texts. So in other words, we reconciled the contradiction by saying that this is talking about the reader and this is talking about the wearer. Me versus the guy looking at me. But now, which one's which? So concludes Abaye, the reader reads it in the order, meaning to say, whatever order you conclude based on the original texts, that order should follow the one who's looking at you, not the one who's wearing it. So now let's understand what this all means. So let's see Rashi. So first, this in reconciling with two statements. One is talking about the right side of the reader and the right side of the one who wears it. When the reader is standing opposite the one who is wearing the tefillin, the right side of this one is the left side of that one. Right? If I'm wearing tefillin and you're standing opposite me, your right side is my left side. Simple enough. Now, the reader, meaning the one who's looking at me, reads it in order. What order? So explains Rashi. They should be read. The reader, the one who's standing opposite me, reads them. I'm looking at the last two lines in the first page, but you can look at the translation on the top of the next page. In the order that they appear in the Torah. Mukdam, the first one first, Ma'uchar, and the latter one later. Helchach, therefore. That which the first Mishnaic age text said, Kadesh v'haya k'viyacha, that the first two chapters as they appear in the Torah, Kadesh v'haya k'viyacha, which is number 1 and 2. Miyamin, to be on the right side, meaning Miyamin yeshal kaida, on the right side of the reader, the one who's standing opposite me. Ka'amar is what it means to say. Tahashta, that now, Kishuhu kaida, if he is looking at my tefillin and he is through X-ray vision reading the text, so he'd be reading in order from right to left. Kedarke miyamino l'shmala, from his right side to his left side, in the order as they appear in the Torah. Kadesh on the right side, v'haya k'viyacha inside, right? The nimtza, and the result is Kaidan Kesidron. He's reading them in the order. Kadesh, v'haya k'viyacha, number 1 and 2. V'hadatana ibcha, and that which said the other way around. The mash mekadosh v'haya k'viyacha mismael, that Kadesh and v'haya k'viyacha, meaning to say number 1 and 2, mismael should be on the left side. Amaniach, we're talking about the left side of the one who's wearing them. Tavi min shel kaira, which is the right side of the reader. Okay, so to make it easier to visualize, look at the table on the bottom there, right there in the middle, so you can see the order. Just look at the top line where it has the arrows, and then this third line where the numbers. So the third line is the numbers as they appear in the Torah. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can see it's going in order of the one looking at the tefillin. So it's very, very simple then. Yeah? Clear? Is this clear? This is Rashi. Take the order as they appear in the Torah and put them in chronological order, right to left, according to the one who is looking at you wearing your tefillin.
I
Yeah?
understand what there's one thing I'm not getting here.
Yeah.
I'm getting the explanation, but the only thing I'm not getting is practically, I'm trying to practice. You're talking about the reader, meaning the Shliach Tzibur?
No, reader is just a way of identifying who's... No, nothing to do with that.
Nothing to do with that?
No. When we're observing the tefillin, one person is wearing them and one person is reading them. Reading them means I'm looking at you. That's all it means. Not actually physically reading them. That's why I said like X-ray vision. It's just a way of identifying who's standing where. Not that he's actually reading it.
Oh.
Reader is just identifying the person who is standing opposite you. The wearer.
An observer.
Observer.
Okay, because I heard reader, I think, is this the Torah reader?
No, I know,
Reading
it's
the
confusing that way.
From the Shema,
No.
The Shema and the Torah? Or
It's confusing that way.
It's the Chazan? I don't know.
No.
I don't know what you meant by it.
Just the one is looking at you.
Okay.
It's a way of identifying. When we're saying right and left.
So you're sitting in a yeshiva, you're davening, he's davening, he's looking at you.
Exactly.
It's like you happen to be standing opposite.
That's correct.
Opposite you, that's all.
It's just a way of identifying what's right and what's left.
Okay.
Because right and left, when I look at it, when I put it on my head, there's one right and left, and then when I look at it before I put it on my head, there's another right and left, because I'm facing it. That's the difference between reader and wearer. That's it. It's just a way of identifying who's facing what, not that they're actually reading anything.
Okay.
Yeah, is that clear? So you can see the table there, how it flows from right to left. First 1, 2, 3, 4. Kadesh li, v'haya k'viyacha, Shema, and then v'haya Shemaya, going from right to left.
Panim to panim basically is the one who's looking at you.
It's correct.
Exactly.
The one who's looking at you, he should see right to left in chronological order as they appear in the Torah. That's Rashi's view. Okay. So in the next text we have the whole Tosfos. We're not going to read the whole Tosfos because it's a long Tosfos, but you'll see the bold words. Those are the main words that I've highlighted, so you can identify what Tosfos' view is. And the translation under the Hebrew text is a translation only of that bold text. So if you want, you can follow along in the translation as well. It's just the translation of the bold text. And in the parentheses, I put interpolative commentary to make it flow. So you can look at the English text in the bottom if you want. I'm going to read the Hebrew bold. So first Tosfos cites Rashi's view in that it goes chronological order, 1, 2, 3, 4, right to left from the observer. And it says Rabbeinu Tam, Rabbeinu Tam, this interpretation of Rashi is difficult to Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam finds it difficult. You could see in the footnote where Rabbeinu Tam is number 16, lived 1100 to 1171 in France. Rashi's grandson. One of the Tosafos. I think we had occasion to talk about this before, what Tosafos is. Tosafos is, in the same way the Gemara is a conglomerate of conversations from over generations, the Tosafos kept their commentary in the same vein. So it's a conglomerate of conversations over a few decades. I don't think it lasted a full century. I don't think it lasted that long. Maybe a few decades. I don't know. You know exactly how long Tosafos last? A century, you think? Maybe about a century. Maybe that's the max. I don't know. At any rate, which is why you'll find different versions of the same Tosafos.
It's interesting, Rashi may not have contradicted his grandson, because he said at the end of his life that if he would have commented on things later in his life, he would have understood them in a different way.
Maybe.
Who knows, maybe he would have agreed with
yeah. Perhaps, but we're going to get to how this machlekes emerged in a moment. At any rate, so the Tosafos are conglomerate of conversations over this decades or century, and which is why you'll have many different Tosafos, the same Tosafos in different versions. In other words, I may have collected the conversations and it'll come out in one way, and he may have collected the conversations and come out a different way. Slight variations. So you'll have the Rosh's Tosafos and the Ritz Tosafos and the Rabbeinu Peretz's Tosafos, but it's all the same Tosafos, meaning a conglomerate of conversations. At any rate, so Rabbeinu Tam says that, or the Tosafos comments that Rabbeinu Tam finds Rashi's interpretation difficult. Why? Damai palginu. Why did the Braita divide it into two? The original Braitas didn't say one right and one left. It said, go back to the first page. It said, the first line, Ketzat Sidron, Kadesh Livahayik Yacham Yamin, meaning the first two parshas, number 1 and 2 from the right, Shema V'Hayim Shemaya, Shema and V'Hayim Shemaya Mismael to the left. Why divide it into two? 2 on the right and 2 on the left. Just say, from right to left, if according to Rashi you're correct. Saying that the reader, the observer, would see the first 2 on the right side. And the other ones, number 3 and 4, on the left side. I should have said, the first parsha, Kadeshli, should be on the right side of the observer. And all the other ones, Mismael, should follow on the left. In other words, just say, read it from right to left. Why dividing it into 2? First 2 on the right side, second 2 on the left side. As if dividing it into 2 things. So we're going to skip the next part and go to the other bold letters. Or you can follow along in English. Therefore, Rabbeinu Tam interprets another way of reading this Gemara. Kadesh v'Haya Kiviyacha, the first 2 parshas, which are Kadeshli and V'Haya Kiviyacha, number 1 and 2, Miyamin Shel Karda, should be on the right side of the observer. Mismael Shel Karda, and then from the left side of the observer, Hava, there will be Shema b'Bachutz, Shema on the exterior side, on the left side, V'Chareh, and afterwards going inward to the towards the right, V'Hayim Shemaya Mifnim on the inside. Now it makes sense why I divided it. So go to the next page and you'll see go to page, it's page 15, if you just flip it over, you'll see the diagram there. So he's dividing it into 2. Kaddish and V'Hayim Kiviyach, number 1 and 2 on the right side, going inward, and then on the left side, Shema, V'Hayim Shemaya, going inward as well. So now we understand why the Brisa divided into 2 statements. The first 2 on the right side going inward, starting from the right going inward, and the other 2 starting from the left going inward, but they're both reading inward like this. In other words, according to Rabbeinu Tam, according to Rashi, there's one beginning, the right side of the observer, and then you slowly go to the left. According to Rabbeinu Tam, there are 2 beginnings, one on the right and one on the left, and therefore the first 2, Kadesh Li V'Hayim Shemaya V'Hayim Kivyacha, on the right side going inward, starting from that beginning, and then on the left side, Shema is the next beginning on the left side, going inward, V'Hayim Shemaya.
It's always from the out toward the middle.
That's correct. And now you understand why there are 2 different statements in the Brisa. They're going inward like this. Clear? So according to Rashi, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and according to Rabbeinu Tam, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 from the observer. Okay? So the first question, sorry?
Doesn't it say over here that Rashi said that the first 2 sections were written on the right and the rest from the left?
Where are you reading from?
From the bottom here.
That's what he's saying it should have said. Bottom of page what?
Page 14.
Yeah, this is Rabbeinu Tam's question on Rashi.
So
He's saying what he should have said.
2 should be for here, and 2 should be coming this way.
That's Rabbeinu Tam's view.
Yeah.
That's Rabbeinu Tam's view. 2 that way, 2 that way.
Yeah.
That's correct. He's saying that according to Rashi, the Gemara's language should have been much simpler. Just the Gemara should have, in other words, in the language of the Gemara, Rabbeinu Tam sounds more correct. In Higayon, in some sort of easy logical sense, Rashi makes sense. We'll try to give some legs to Taisus in a moment, but in terms of logic, it makes sense to go with Rashi. The Torah writes in a certain order, so you write them in a certain order. Why are you changing the order of the Torah? So Rabbeinu Tam is keeping the order of the Torah, but in an awkward fashion. First starting from the right, and then you get to the middle, and now you start all of a sudden from the left. But the language of the Gemara follows Rabbeinu Tam, because the Gemara divides it into 2. 2 from the right and 2 from the left. Now you're doing that according to Rabbeinu Tam. You have 2 from the right and 2 from the left.
Also for Rabbeinu Tam, when you read the third one, you start here.
You're going backwards.
But you read this way.
Right, so you're reading right
here and you read this way.
Exactly. Because you're reading right to left, but yet you're placing them left to right.
It's
it's a little bit awkward in such a sense. Right? But hopefully we'll get some more. So that's what I'm saying. In terms of the psukim, it would sound right according to Rashi. You're going chronological order. But in terms of the language of the Braisis of the Gemara, Rabbeinu Tam sounds more right, because the language of the Gemara is 2 from the right, 2 from the left, and this would make sense following strictly that language. Right? And it all comes down to understanding when the Gemara answered, Abaye said, and the reader reads it in the order. In the order of what? Right? The Gemara reconciled the two statements by saying one is talking about the reader, one's talking about the observer, one's talking about the wearer, the one who's wearing tefillin, right? And the Gemara concluded, and the reader reads in the order. Order of what? So Rashi says, in the order as they appear in the Torah. Okay, so the observer sees them in the order that they appear in the Torah. Simple. Now Rabbeinu Tam says, no, the observer reads them in the orders as they're written in the Brisa. Namely, first right to left to the middle, and then left to right to the middle. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Making it again a little bit more awkward.
It makes it sound as if there are 2 columns.
Exactly.
As if somebody's reading 2 columns, in
That's correct.
In a book, yeah. Whereas the other one is saying, no.
Just go in order.
It's 1 paragraph.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Okay. So we're going to before we get to the next text, which is the Shut Min HaShamayim, I'll explain what that is in a moment. But I just want to address one important thing. Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam lived in 1100s.
12th century.
Right. Rashi died in 1105. I put in the footnotes all the dates, so it's easy to follow along. Rashi lived 1040 to 1105, and Rabbeinu Tam lived 1100 and 1171. So Rabbeinu Tam was 5 years old when his grandfather Rashi passed away. So we're not talking about that long ago relative to Jewish history. People were wearing tefillin, presumably, obviously, for hundreds of years before. So when did this dispute emerge? Why didn't each of them, Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, just open up what their just everybody follow what your parents were doing? So everybody was wearing tefillin one way, and all of a sudden Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam came along and had a dispute and everything, but it changed. So the basic way of understanding this is, and we mentioned this, we talked a little bit about this when we gave a class on how the Haggadah came to be, what the history of who wrote the Haggadah is. And we explained that there was an initial commandment from the Torah to relate the story of the Exodus. And our sages gave us guidelines as to how that story should be related. And over time, different customs emerged as to how to fulfill the guidelines of our sages in the commandment of fulfilling in guidelines fulfilling the commandment to relay the story of the Exodus. And that's how the Haggadah emerged. We explained this a little bit more in detail. And we cited there to a famous passage in the Beis Yosef, which is Beis Yosef is the author of the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Cairo, who wrote a commentary on the previous code of Jewish law, the Torah. And there, he talks about a statement from the Gemara, where the Gemara says, with respect to the law of the shofar, shofar blowing. When one blows a shofar, so every time you blow shofar in Torah, there are many times one blows trumpets and blasts in Torah, but they always begin with a tekiah and end with a tekiah. The question is what's in the middle. Tekiah is the long 2, so that's always the beginning and at the end. The question is what happens in the middle. So when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, what's supposed to happen in the middle is a cry. What's the definition of a cry? Is it wailing, and therefore it's more prolonged? Two. Or is it someone who's like panting? Two. And there's the 2 different types of sounds in the shofar. And the Gemara says that people would do it this, people would do it that way, until Abahu came along and said, let's do both. Which is why today we do both. we do one set combined and then another set, which each one individually, thus covering all bases. So Beis Yosef explained, how did this custom emerge? Because there was no custom. Torah says to put a cry in the middle, so each rabbi in each location decided on their own what a cry sounds like, and they did it on their own. But over time, where communities are moving back and forth, and they're saying, I did it different here, different there, so they decided, you know what, let's combine all the customs, make sure everybody does it together. So one might say that the same thing is true happened here, except for the combination part. Except for the concluding thing where everybody said to combine together. Rather, you had, the Torah says to wear tefillin 4 times. And the Gemara says the guidelines are that it should be in order, right to left, for the observer. And each community used that same guidelines and came to a different conclusion. And thus, even before Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, there already was this dispute. And perhaps this dispute started right from the time when Moshe came from Sinai. The moment Moshe came down at Sinai, well, actually, the moment wasn't because they only had 2 parshas then. But let's say when they came into Torah, when they came into Eretz Yisrael, and they already had all 4 parshas. Because the second 2 parshas are in Devarim, right? You look at where they come from. The first 2 on Shemois, that came right away. So they must have wore tefillin at least for 40 years with just 2 parshas, if you think about it. And then at the end of the traveling in the desert, when the other 2 parshas arrived, Devarim, they wore 4 parshas in their tefillin. So right at that point, we can imagine that some scholars came to the conclusion to wear it right to left in order, and other scholars came to say it the other way. So the dispute between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam actually way predate Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. They just happen to each write and verbalize their view one way or the other based on what people wore before, and that's how they've been labeled Rashi's tefillin and Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin. But in essence, they really predate them, and it's very possible, and it's not unreasonable to think that it goes all the way back to the times the Jews first put on tefillin right when they came into Eretz Yisrael. Because why not? They're all following interpretive understandings that began at Sinai. So why wouldn't the dispute begin at Sinai?
Wouldn't Moshe tell them what's right and what's wrong?
First of all, yes. But second of all, that's true of every single dispute in Torah. And that's why the Rambam writes in his introduction to Mishnayos that if Moshe Rabbeinu told them what to do, then that's what they did. But if Moshe didn't, and he only gave them interpretive rules, which is for many, many, many cases, then says the Torah, you follow the 13 principles by which the Torah is derived, and so long as you're using those rules and you follow the majority, you're doing the right thing. Now if that's the case, one could imagine that the dispute began right away. Why not? It certainly predates Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. The question is how far back? And why not go back all the way to the beginning? I don't see why you shouldn't say so. Mm-hmm. And they just codified it, so it became labeled as theirs, but it wasn't. I don't think it's their originals. That would make no sense whatsoever. That wouldn't follow.
Given that the majority of the Jewish world Rashi has always been the primary way of it, is it fair to say that pre Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam that the predominant way of doing tefillin was the way Rashi does it?
I don't think so, actually. And here comes the next text. Okay. I actually don't think so. And I'm not really sure when it began to be which way. So let's see the next 2 texts and we'll kind of get an idea. So let's see. The first one is what's called Shalosh Teshuvos Min HaShamayim. So if you look at footnote 17, it's literally Shalosh Teshuvos Min HaShamayim means responsive from heaven. It's written by Yaakov bar Levi Halevi, also France, 1243. So he lives about 100 years after Rashi. We said Rashi died in 1105, and Rabbeinu Tam died in 1171. So this is
50 years later.
Yeah, after Rabbeinu Tam. And he's a renowned halachic authority and Kabbalist. Now, responsive from heaven is a collection of questions he addressed to heaven and answers he received via revelation during his dreams. Now, in terms of halachic validation, you can look up the Radvaz, it's a famous halachic responsa, section 1, responsa 340, where there he quotes from this book and talks about the specialty of this book. But at any rate, so this is a... Sorry?
Was he a prophet?
I don't know if it's called prophecy. It's probably more Ruach HaKodesh. Ruach HaKodesh means it's a degree less than prophecy. It's literally means a Holy Spirit. I can't tell you any more than that, but it's not prophecy exactly. But it's a certain level of divine revelation, if you will.
How do they prove that? Doesn't a prophet have to, if he says it, makes a statement?
Yeah, so I don't think he doesn't get the laws of prophecy.
If it's not true.
He doesn't get the law of prophecy. He wasn't making prophecies or predictions, not that I know of at least. But at least the point is, we're really trusting him. He says that he received these things from heaven. We're trusting him, and we're trusting the people of his era who trusted him. And that's why I put the Radvaz there. Because the Radvaz is a accepted halachic authority, and he cites to this book, responsive from heaven, and thus we're relying on the Radvaz. He's relying on this Shut min hashamayim.
Others could dispute this.
Yeah, he doesn't give this is not a halachic ruling, but it's an interesting text. It's an interesting text to give you insights. And what's interesting is, from the way he frames the question, this is to answer your point, that he lives after Rashi and Tam both passed away, and he still describes a world where some communities wear Rashi's tefillin and some wear Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin, which means at least during Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam's lifetime, there were certainly communities doing it both ways, and even after their lifetime. Right? Especially considering that Rambam agreed with Rashi.
Yeah, initially were Rabbeinu Tam, they changed it.
Rambam changed.
Yeah, changed,
so
yeah.
there you go. So that means even during Rambam's time, which is how long after, when did Rambam live?
14th century, no?
No, Rambam was the 12th century.
So it's after Rashi.
After Rashi, yeah.
So it's about 100 years or so later. So there's still this dispute going on.
Yeah.
So it must have lasted for quite a long time. And maybe there are earlier texts, but the first place I know that where it says that the custom is Rashi is Shulchan Aruch, which is almost a few hundred years later. Maybe there are texts earlier.
Yeah, I think you mean Rashi as well.
We're going to get to the Midrashim. We're going to have the Midrashim in actually, Tosis mentioned the Midrash, but we actually left that out. But anyway, okay. So let's see this Shut min hashamayim. Va'oid sha'alti. In addition, I asked, I'll say that a parsha should be tefillin with respect to the order of the parshas at tefillin. V'kacha yisashar loisi. And this is my question that he posed to heaven. Ana hamelech hagadol hagiba v'anerach hachamarazim. Please, mighty, awesome King, wise of secrets, Megalan Estaris, revealer of that which is hidden, Magid Nalamis, the reteller of the concealed, Shemer Habris, the guardian of our covenant, the Achesed, and the kindness, Higdol Chazdacha, please bestow your kindness, Imanu, with us, Hayom today, and please command he's talking to God, please command your angels, Laidieni, to inform me, that which we have been in doubt, besay their parsha shall tefillin with respect to the order of tefillin. There are those sages, which say, the two parshas, the two sections of the Torah which begin with the word Vahaya, should be in the middle, namely the Rabbeinu Tam's. Look at the box right above it. Vahaya Kiviyacha, Vahaya Mishemaya are both in the middle according to Rabbeinu Tam. And according to these sages, if you did it the other way around, psulas they are invalid. This is another key. That according to Rabbeinu Tam, wearing Rashi's tefillin is invalid. And another important thing is, he doesn't call them Rashi or Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin. He just says some sages this way and some sages that way. Again, further some support to what I was saying earlier, that only later became labeled as Rashi and Tam's tefillin. But initially, it was just some communities that way. They just happened to identify them. Right? Because he doesn't say Rashi and Tam, which is 50 years after they passed away, and he says some sages this way, some sages that way, without identifying them by name. Other sages, which say Havayas Kisidron, that the Vahayas, the opening words of the parshas which begin with Vahaya, should be in order as they appear in the Torah, 1, 2, 3, 4, like Rashi. And according to those sages, if you switched it around and did it like Rabbeinu Tam, psulas, they'd be invalid. Va'ata now Melech King of Kings, Tzaveh L'malachach Doshim, command your holy angels like to inform me. Halacha kedivri mi. Who does halacha follow? V'divri mi etamachavim, and whose words do you cherish? Do you favor? Ve'hishivu, and the response I received from heaven was, quote, Elo ve'elo divri lekim chayim. These and these are the words of the living God. That is to say, both correct. And the same way here in this world, there's a dispute amongst the sages as to which way its tefillin should be worn. Good morning, the same is true of a dispute up in heaven. But listen to this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God Himself, Omer says, Havoyos be'emtza. God Himself says that the two parshas which begin with the word Vahaya, Vahaya Mishemaya and Vahaya Kivyacha, should be in the middle. That is like Rabbeinu Tam. God says to wear Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin, whatever that means. But all the court in heaven, the host, the heavenly court, God's court, disagree with God. And when they say Havayas Kasidron, they say like Rashi that the Vahaya should be in the order. But remember, he began with saying both the words of the living God, meaning to say even the heavenly court, which is supposedly arguing with God in air quotes, is also the word of the living God.
Yeah.
This requires lots of Kabbalah to understand. But the basic idea is that there are no entities outside of Hashem. obviously, including this physical world, and certainly not in heaven. So when you say that the heavenly court, or you say that God does something, like for example, when you say Hu Beis Dino, when Hashem and His court does something, or Hashem does something Himself, it's talking about different levels of revelation of Hashem, but it's all God.
That's right. So
It's all divinity. Within the divine revelation, there are different levels. And the level known as Kutsha B'richu says Rabbeinu Tam. And the level known as Pamal Shalmaila says Rashi. The different levels within divine truth, identified one as Kutsha B'richu, the Holy One must be, and one as Pamal Shalmaila, His heavenly court. But it's all God, obviously.
But basically, heavenly court is basically saying the logic that you have put forward to the Lord. The human beings will understand it in this way. It's not that you're wrong, God.
So that's right.
Human beings will understand it in this way. So as a result,
I was going to get to that.
Have them understand, yeah.
I was going to get to that. And that gets to the last line here. I was going to get to that. But I didn't translate this into English. And the reason I didn't is I'm not 100% sure as to what he's saying, but I'm pretty sure to what he's saying in this last line. And if you think I'm wrong about this, it's fine. But this is what he says. I'm going to translate literally what the Shutma Shemaim says, and I'll tell you what I think he means. V'hu asher diber Hashem. This is what Hashem means when he says in the verse, B'kroivai ektash, in being close to me, or B'kroivai ektash, in your closeness to me, I am sanctified. I am made holy. End quote from the verse. Va'al kol pnei ha'am echbad. Another verse which says that on the face of all the nation, I am glorified. V'zeu kvoidai, and this is His glory. B'yois parshas malchus shemayim tchila, that the parshas, the sections that have the sovereignty of heaven, go first. End quote. What does he mean in this last line? What does he mean? I think what he means is, he's giving us the logic for why God says, like Rabbeinu Tam. Why is that? He's quoting verses which say that God's sanctity is dependent on the people. And on the face of all people is their glory. On their face, meaning on our tefillin. Now what's the glory of Hashem? That the first thing the Jew says is, I accept the sovereignty of heaven. Now, in the chronological order of the way the parashas appear in the Torah, the sovereignty of heaven, which is the Shema, declaring God's sovereignty, comes number 3. So you can't put that first in your tefillin. The only way you can put it first in your tefillin is if you did it like Rabbeinu Tam, where number 3 starts at the beginning on the left. So by Rabbeinu Tam adding a new beginning, he's now giving sovereignty of heaven a first. It's a first from the left. In Rabbeinu Tam's view, where you have 2 beginnings, one from the right, one from the left, going this way, and the two Vahayas going, Kaddish Vahaya going this way, and Shema Vahaya Shemaya going that way. So in Rabbeinu Tam's view, this is what I think what he means. If you have another reading, I'm willing to listen.
We see things in a linear way, in a chronological way. But when Ibishti gave the 10 Commandments, he gave them all at the same time. So actually, it's not that God is it's just from a logical point of view, we see things in a linear way. We have to see chronologically, but we can't.
So from the divine revelation known as Pamal Shamal, the heavenly court, the heavenly court which communicates to our world in a more direct sense, that one says go chronological order like Rashi. But a higher divine revelation, Kutsha B'richu, where their chronological order doesn't really begin because it's all beyond time and space to begin with. And there it says the primary, not the first in terms of order, but the primary thing is accepting the yoke of heaven. Now if that's the case, the way we should put it on is accepting the yoke of heaven should be the first thing you do. But how can you do that in our world when things come in chronology? And there you have Rabbeinu Tam's reading where at least there's another beginning on the left side where the first one is the Shema, the declarance of God's sovereignty. And perhaps that's what he means. All of this to say, this is a little Kabbalistic, but getting back to the halacha of it is that even in this time, after Rabbeinu Tam's and Rashi's life, there still was no consensus. And he doesn't give us consensus. He says everybody's good. And he clearly writes that there were some sages that said, do it this way, and they're screaming at the other one saying, you guys are not wearing kosher tefillin. And these guys are putting it on this way and screaming at the other guys and saying, you're not putting on kosher tefillin. So at what point in history did the conclusion come and say that we should follow Rashi? I don't know, but this is 1243. The next text I have is from the Shulchan Aruch, which is from 1745 to 1812. No, sorry. So wait. Sorry, Rambam. So Rambam writes to follow. The numbers I gave were just wrong. Rambam says to follow Rashi, but as Rabbi Gimel mentioned, he first used the word tefillin like Rabbeinu Tam, and then he decided to go like Rashi, which means even in his time there were some sages this way, some sages that way.
Maybe that was the turning point when Rambam said to do it that way.
Maybe. The problem is, as we'll learn soon, the Ravid disagrees with Rambam, and the Ravid says to go like Rashi, but in a different way.
No,
which we'll get to.
The
Ravid
would say to Rabbeinu Tam, go with Rabbeinu, because Rambam says go with Rashi.
Yeah, what did I say?
He said,
yes. Ravid says to go like Rabbeinu Tam, but in a different way. So it means even in Rambam's time there was a dispute. It wasn't so settled then either. So the first text that I've seen, maybe there's earlier texts where it says that this is the accepted practice, is in the Shulchan Aruch, which is from 1488 to 1575. So it's about 200 years later. No, between 1243.
Because Rashi.
Okay, between Rashi and Tam.
1171.
Yeah.
To the
So
14.
somewhere. Yeah. So somewhere.
Years,
Yeah. But the Shupman Shemayim, which is 1243.
1204. So.
Right. Right. But there's still a dispute, and Shupman Shemayim we see clearly also still a dispute. So somewhere between 1243 and the Shulchan Aruch, which is in 1488, between 1488 and 1575. Somewhere between those generations, so somewhere between the span of 10 generations, people came to the conclusion, and the majority followed Rashi. So it seems. I don't know when that happened, and maybe there's an earlier text that we can find, do some research to see some other texts in between to see what was if there was any conclusion. In other words, if you found a text which said, I think Rashi's right, it's not good enough. You have to find a text which said that the prevailing custom is to do Rashi. Because if all you found was a text that said, I think Rashi's right, then you find another text that says, I think Rabbeinu Tam is right. Like Rambam. Rambam says, I think Rashi's right, and Rabbi said, I think Rabbeinu Tam is right. So finding a text that says, I think this is right is not good enough. You have to find a text which says, the prevailing custom is to do this. And the first that I've seen, at least, is the Shulchan Aruch, which comes some 200 years later. So we're out of time, but God willing, tomorrow we'll look at the Shulchan Aruch, we'll look at the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, we'll look at what the Rebbe has to say, and we'll see, first of all, this idea of the custom being to follow Rashi, number one. Number two, we'll get to the Chabad custom of wearing dafka 2 pairs of tefillin, and where this all comes from, and what this all means. But at least now we know what the dispute between Rashi and Tam are. And remember, I think someone mentioned that there are 4 pairs of tefillin. Shemushi, Rabbi, and Ravid. And God willing, if we'll have time tomorrow, we'll get to the other 2 pairs of tefillin also. Because we have 2 now. We'll get the other 2, God willing, tomorrow. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
From the reader's point of view.